The night she was left to die did not begin with cruelty. It began with silence. A silence so thick it pressed against the ears, broken only by the whisper of wind through bare branches and the distant cry of something wild that knew how to survive, better than humans ever did. The little girl lay curled beside the frozen drainage ditch, her small body wrapped in a threadbare sweater 2 sizes too big, her knees pulled tight to her chest as if she could fold, herself small enough to disappear. Her name was Lila, though no one had spoken it with kindness for a long time. She was 6 years old, and she had already learned the most dangerous lesson a child can learn, that love could vanish without warning. Earlier that evening, her mother's voice had been sharp as broken glass. Her father's had been worse, not loud, not angry, just empty. That emptiness frightened Lila more than shouting ever could. When they told her to get in the car, she obeyed the way she always did, clutching her rag doll with the missing eye, whispering promises to it that everything would be fine even though she knew it wouldn't. She didn't ask where they were going. Asking questions only made things harder. She had learned that too. The car ride felt endless. Streetlights blurred past the window like dying stars. At some point, her mother stopped pretending, stopped sighing dramatically about how some children were just born. Wrong, her father said nothing at all. When the car finally slowed, the road beneath them turned rough, gravel crunching like bones. Trees closed in on both sides, tall and dark, their branches clawing at the sky. The engine cut off. The sudden quiet was so complete it rang. "Get out," her father said. Lila hesitated. Her fingers tightened around her doll. "Did I do something bad?" she asked softly, already knowing the answer wouldn't save her. Her mother opened the door and pulled her out with one hard tug. The cold slapped Lila's face, stole the breath from her lungs. "You ruin everything," her mother hissed, eyes sharp with something that wasn't even anger anymore. It was relief. "We tried. God knows we tried." The trunk opened. For a moment, Lila thought maybe they were getting something for her. A blanket, food, something. Instead, her father shoved the sweater into her arms and turned away. The trunk slammed shut. The car doors closed. The engine started. Lila stood there stunned, watching the red taillights glow, then shrink, then vanish completely into the dark. She waited for them to come back. She counted to 50, the way her teacher had once taught her when she felt scared. Then she counted again. The night grew colder. The wind pushed her toward the ditch, and she stumbled, skinning her palm on frozen dirt. The pain barely registered. What hurt more was the understanding settling into her bones. They were not coming back. She cried then, not loud at first, just small, broken sounds that fogged the air in front of her mouth. She called for her mother once, then her father. Each name felt heavier than the last. When no answer came, she curled up by the ditch, pulling the sweater around her like a shield that could not shield her from the cold or the truth. Her tears soaked into the fabric, stiffening as the temperature dropped. The world felt very big and very empty, and Lila felt like a mistake the universe had decided to erase. Miles away, Ethan Hale drove with his window cracked open despite the cold, letting the night air sting his face because pain was easier than numbness. He was 34 years old and already exhausted, in a way that sleep could not fix. The passenger seat beside him was empty, as it had been for 2 years now, but sometimes he still reached for it without realizing. Sometimes he still thought he heard laughter there. Tonight, he had taken the long way home from the mill, avoiding the streets that reminded him too much of the life he'd lost. Ethan was a widower. The word still felt foreign, like clothing that didn't fit right. His wife, Mara, had died in a crash on a rainy road, leaving behind a house that echoed, and a man who had no idea how to be whole on his own. They had tried for a child once, twice it never happened. Fate, it seemed, had decided that Ethan would be spared the pain of fatherhood only to be crushed by the loss of love instead. Some nights he wondered which cruelty was worse. The road he drove that night was not one he usually took. Gravel rattled beneath his tires and he frowned, wondering when the pavement had ended. He should have turned around. He almost did. Then he saw something near the edge of his headlights, something small, something that moved. At first, he thought it was an animal. A deer, maybe. He slowed instinctively, heart hammering. Then he saw the sweater. Too big, too human. He slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before stopping. Ethan sat there for a second, breath shallow, staring through the windshield. The world narrowed to the cone of light, spilling from his headlights, illuminating a tiny shape curled by the ditch. His door creaked open as he stepped out, boots crunching softly on gravel. "Hello?" he called, voice rough from disuse. "Hey, are you okay?" The little shape flinched. Lila lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale beneath dirt-smudged skin. For a terrifying second, she thought her parents had come back. Then she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined with concern instead of anger. Fear surged anyway. Adults always hurt you eventually. She scrambled backward, slipping on the icy ground. "Easy," Ethan said quickly, holding up his hands. "I won't hurt you. I promise." Promises meant very little to Lila, but she was so tired, so cold. She hugged her doll tighter and whispered, "Please don't be mad." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He knelt slowly, keeping his distance. Up close, she looked impossibly small, fragile. Abandoned. Something inside him cracked open, raw and aching. "I'm not mad," he said, voice breaking despite himself. I'm worried about you. What are you doing out here all alone?" She didn't answer right away. Her teeth chattered violently. Ethan noticed the way her hands shook, the bluish tinge creeping into her lips. Hypothermia. Panic flared. He slipped off his coat without thinking and held it out toward her. "You're freezing. Please, take this." She stared at the coat like it might bite her. Then the cold one. She reached out with trembling fingers and wrapped it around herself. The warmth was immediate, overwhelming. Tears spilled again, but these were quieter, more confused. "My name's Ethan," he said gently. "What's yours?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Lila." "Lila," he repeated, as if anchoring the sound in the world. "Where are your parents?" Her face crumpled. She shook her head once. Then again, They went away." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, a silent prayer forming without words. When he opened them, his resolve was set. Whatever had happened here, whatever mess this was, he was not walking away. Not tonight, not ever. "Okay," he said softly. "Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you somewhere warm. Somewhere safe." She looked up at him, eyes wide and shining in the headlights. "You won't leave me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The question shattered something deep inside him. He swallowed hard. "No," he said, "I won't." And in that frozen, forgotten place, as the night pressed close and fate shifted its weight, two broken lives brushed against each other for the first time, one left to die, and one who had forgotten how to live, neither of them knowing yet that this moment would change everything. Ethan lifted Lila into his arms as if she were made of glass. She stiffened at first, instinctively bracing for pain, but it never came. His hold was steady, careful, the kind of grip that said he was afraid of hurting her more than she was afraid of him. The warmth of his coat wrapped around her small body, and for the first time that night, the shaking eased just a little. She pressed her face into the rough fabric, breathing in a scent she didn't recognize, wood smoke, engine oil, something quietly human, and her eyes fluttered shut despite herself. The inside of the truck felt like another world. Heat poured from the vents, fogging the windshield as Ethan hurried around to the driver's side. He settled her into the passenger seat, buckling her in with slow, deliberate movements, explaining every step so she wouldn't panic. She watched him through heavy eyelids, memorizing his face the way scared children do, cataloging expressions, looking for warning signs. There were lines around his eyes, a tiredness in the way his shoulders slumped, but there was no cruelty there, no sharp edge. That confused her more than fear ever had. "Where are we going?" she asked weakly. "Home," he replied, then paused. The word felt big, complicated. "Well, my home, just for tonight, somewhere warm." She nodded, too exhausted to argue. As the truck rumbled back to life and the gravel road disappeared behind them, Lila's body finally gave in to fatigue. Her head lolled to the side, cheek pressed against the seatbelt. Breath shallow but steady. Ethan glanced at her every few seconds, heart pounding, half afraid she might vanish if he looked away too long. The drive back felt shorter, though his thoughts raced the entire way. Questions piled up faster than he could answer them. Who leaves a child out here? Why hadn't anyone reported her missing? What if she was hurt internally? What if he was already too late? He drove faster than usual, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened, whispering reassurances she couldn't hear. When they reached his small house on the edge of town, the porch light cast a soft yellow glow over peeling paint and worn steps. It wasn't much, a two-bedroom place that had once been filled with laughter and plans, but it was solid, safe. Ethan parked and hurried around to Lila's side, lifting her again when she stirred, murmuring something incoherent. He carried her inside, the door closing behind them with a quiet finality that seemed to seal the night away. The house was cold at first. Ethan set her gently on the couch, piling blankets over her small frame before turning the thermostat higher than he ever did for himself. He moved with frantic purpose, grabbing a glass of water, a granola bar, anything he thought might help. When he knelt beside her, she was awake again, eyes tracking his movements warily. "You're safe here," he said, as much for himself as for her. "No one's going to hurt you." She studied his face. Are you alone?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's just me." She seemed to relax at that, just a fraction. Alone felt familiar, less dangerous than too many people. She took a small sip of water when he offered it. Then another, color slowly returning to her cheeks. When he handed her the granola bar, she stared at it as if unsure whether she was allowed. "You can eat," he said gently. "It's okay." She took tiny bites, savoring each one like it might be her last. Ethan watched, chest tight, noticing the way she tried not to make crumbs, the way she kept glancing up at him as if waiting for permission. This was not the behavior of a love child. This was survival. After she finished, her eyelids drooped again. Ethan hesitated, then asked, "Do you want to sleep?" She nodded immediately. "Please." He carried her to the spare bedroom, the one that had never been used, the one that had once held boxes of what-ifs and someday maybes. He laid her on the bed, tucking the blankets around her carefully. The room smelled faintly of dust and old dreams, but it was warm and the bed was soft. Layla curled on her side, clutching her doll, eyes already closing. "Ethan," she murmured. "I'm right here." "Will you be here when I wake up?" The question pierced him straight through. He sat on the edge of the bed, voice thick. "Yes, I promise." She seemed to consider this, then whispered, "Okay," and drifted into sleep, her breathing evening out as exhaustion finally claimed her. Ethan stayed there long after she slept. He watched her chest rise and fall, listened for any hitch in her breath, any sign that the night might steal her back. Memories he had tried to bury clawed their way up. Mara's laughter, the way she used to talk about baby names, the nursery they never finished. He pressed a hand to his face, shoulders shaking silently. What was he doing? He was no one. A struggling widower with a failing truck and a heart held together by habit. He couldn't fix this, couldn't save her from whatever past she'd come from. And yet he had already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had picked her up. He had said the word safe. He had promised to stay. Morning came slowly. Pale light crept through the curtains, chasing away the shadows of the night. Lila woke with a start, disoriented, her heart racing until she remembered the warmth, the coat, the voice that hadn't yelled. She sat up, clutching her doll, listening. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the woods. This quiet didn't feel like abandonment. She padded softly down the hallway, bare feet cold on the floor. From the kitchen came the sound of movement, cups clinking, a kettle whistling softly. She peeked around the corner and saw Ethan standing at the counter, hair messy, eyes tired, pouring hot water into a mug. He turned and smiled when he saw her, relief flooding his features. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, unsure what to do with the sudden tightness in her chest. You didn't leave?" "No," he replied simply. "I said I wouldn't." Something shifted then, small but profound. Lila took a tentative step into the kitchen, then another. The world still felt dangerous. People still hurt. But for the first time in a very long while, there was a crack in the fear, a thin beam of light pushing through. Neither of them knew it yet, but the hardest part of their journey was only just beginning. The day unfolded in cautious pieces. Like a fragile truce neither of them fully trusted. Ethan made oatmeal the way Mara used to, too much water, not enough sugar, then apologized before Lila even tasted it. She ate anyway, spoon clutched tightly in her small fist, eyes flicking up at him between bites. Every sound made her flinch, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the distant bark of a dog outside. Ethan noticed them all and hated the invisible scars he couldn't see. After breakfast, he knelt in front of her, lowering himself to her level. "Lila," he said gently, "I need to ask you some things. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Do you know your last name?" She shook her head. "Do you know where you live? Or lived?" Another shake, smaller this time. His chest tightened. "Do you remember your parents' names?" Her fingers curled into the sweater sleeves. "Mama," she whispered. And he didn't like when I said his name." Ethan swallowed hard. Each missing detail felt like another door slamming shut. This wasn't neglect, it was erasure. Someone had tried to make this child disappear, not just from the world, but from herself. "Okay," he said softly. "That's okay. We'll figure things out together." The word "together" seemed to echo in the room. Lila studied him as if searching for the trick hidden inside it. Adults didn't say things like that without a price. She waited for the condition, the demand, the moment when kindness turned sharp. It didn't come. Instead, Ethan stood and reached for the phone on the wall. His hand hovered there for a long moment before he dialed. The call to social services was the hardest thing he'd done since identifying Mara's body. Every instinct screamed that once he involved the world, it would take Lila away, swallow her into a system that chewed up children and spit them out quieter. Smaller, more broken, but doing nothing was not an option. When he hung up, Lila was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Are they coming for me?" she asked, voice trembling. Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides and crouched in front of her again. "They're coming to help," he said carefully. "And I'll be right here the whole time." "You won't let them take me back?" she whispered. "Back where?" Her eyes filled with tears. "To the bad place." The words cut deeper than any description ever could. Ethan felt something solidify inside him, a quiet, dangerous resolve. "No," he said, voice firm. "No one is taking you back to anyone who hurt you." She stared at him, searching his face. When she finally nodded, it was the smallest movement imaginable, but it felt like trust. The social worker arrived just before noon, a woman named Janice, with kind eyes and a clipboard held like a shield. She spoke gently, asked careful questions, and gave Lila space when her answers faltered. Ethan stayed close, never leaving the room, his presence a silent anchor. When Janice asked if Lila would be willing to stay with him temporarily, pending investigation, the little girl's hand found Ethan's sleeve without even realizing it. "I'll stay," Ethan said before Janice finished the sentence. Janice raised an eyebrow. "You understand what that means, Mr. Hale. Background checks, home visits, court dates." He nodded. "I understand." What he didn't say was that understanding didn't matter. He would face anything if it meant Lila didn't end up alone again. After Janice left, the house felt different, charged, uncertain. Lila sat on the couch, swinging her legs, watching Ethan as he cleaned up. "Are you in trouble?" he asked quietly. He smiled sadly. "No, just starting something new, I guess." "Because of me?" He stopped, turned to her fully. "Because I found you," he corrected. "That matters." That afternoon, Ethan dug through boxes in the garage until he found an old stuffed bear, one Mara had bought years ago, just in case. He washed it, dried it, and handed it to Lila like an offering. She stared at it for a long moment, then hugged it to her chest, eyes shining. As evening fell, Ethan sat alone on the porch while Lila slept, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Fear crept in at the edges of his resolve. He was broken, poor, unprepared. What? Right, did he have to step into a child's life like this? Then he remembered the way she'd asked if he would still be there in the morning. Some choices didn't need qualifications. Inside, Lila dreamed not of the woods, not of the ditch, but of warmth and light and a man who hadn't walked away. The past still loomed dark and unfinished. But for the first time, it didn't own the night. And as the stars blinked on above a quiet, weathered house, Chapter 1 of their shared fate closed, not with certainty, but with something far rarer, hope. The weeks that followed did not arrive gently. They came like cautious visitors, stepping into Ethan's house one by one, testing the floorboards, waiting to see if anything would collapse. Routine became their quiet shield. Ethan woke early for the mill, leaving notes on the fridge written in blocky, uncertain handwriting, oatmeal's in the pot. Be back by 4. Lila learned the rhythm of his footsteps, the sound of his truck starting, the way the house breathed when he was gone, and how it seemed to exhale when he returned. Trust did not bloom all at once. It crept in slowly, like sunlight inching across a cold floor. Lila spoke little at first. She answered questions with nods or shrugs, saving her words as if they were precious coins. Nightmares still came. Some nights Ethan would wake to soft whimpers through the thin walls, and he would sit on the edge of her bed without touching her, whispering that she was safe, that she was not alone. He never asked what she saw in those dreams. He understood that some truths arrived only when they were ready. The social worker returned twice. Paperwork piled up on the kitchen table. Words like temporary custody and ongoing investigation floating between them like fragile glass. Ethan signed where he was told, asked careful questions, swallowed fear with each pen stroke. He worried constantly that someone more qualified would appear, someone with money, with parenting classes already completed, with a life that wasn't stitched together by grief. Each knock on the door made his chest tighten. Lila noticed his tension before he realized it himself. One afternoon, as he stared at the bills spread before him, she climbed into the chair across from him and pushed her stuffed bear toward his hands. "You can hold him," solemnly. "He helps when I'm scared." Ethan laughed once, sharply, then stopped when he saw her earnest face. He took the bear, feeling something inside him loosen. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That's very kind." School became the next hurdle. The idea terrified. Lila classrooms meant adults with rules and children who asked questions she couldn't answer. On the first morning, she clung to Ethan's jacket, her body rigid with fear. He knelt, met her eyes, and said, "I'll be right here when the bell rings. I promise." She searched his face, then let go with visible effort. When she ran back into his arms afterward, relief shaking her small frame, Ethan knew he would never forget that moment as long as he lived. Slowly, pieces of her began to surface. She liked drawing houses with big windows. She hated loud voices. She flinched when doors closed too hard. Once while washing dishes, Ethan found her standing perfectly still behind him, frozen because a plate had slipped and cracked in the sink. He turned slowly, lowered his voice, and showed her the plate already in pieces. "It's okay," he said. "Nothing bad is going to happen." She nodded. But her hands shook for an hour afterward. At night, when the house was quiet, Ethan wrestled with guilt. He worried that loving her would make losing her unbearable. He worried that his past, his grief, his anger, his mistakes would bleed into her future. Sometimes he sat in the dark living room, staring at the wall where a family photo once hung, wondering if he was stealing something that didn't belong to him. But then Lila would pad into the room in her oversized pajamas, curl up beside him without asking, and rest her head on his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And the doubts would fall silent. The call came on a grey afternoon. The investigation had confirmed what Ethan already knew in his bones. Lila had been deliberately abandoned. Her parents had vanished. Criminal charges were being discussed. Long-term placement needed to be decided. Janice's voice was calm, professional. "We'd like to know if you're willing to pursue permanent guardianship, possibly adoption down the line." The word hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked down the hallway toward Lila's room, where soft humming drifted out, tuneless but content. "Yes," he said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. "I am." That night he told Lila as simply as he could. "They asked if you'd like to stay here." "For good." She stared at him, eyes wide. Forever? As long as you want, he said. As long as they'll let us. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him with a fierceness that knocked the breath from his lungs. In that embrace was fear, hope, and a trust so fragile it terrified him to hold it. Outside, winter began to loosen its grip. Snow melted into mud, trees hinted at green. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was guaranteed. But two lives, once broken in separate ways, were learning, slowly, bravely, how to stand together against the world.